Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction and, of course, also the invitation. I hope I can give you a little bit a recap and also some new views on topicals for psoriasis. I also work at Leiden University and also at Center for Human Drug Research. We do first in human studies, clinical trials. So this is why you see the list of collaborators and sponsors is quite long. And today will be about topicals. And I'd like to share with you the view of a pharmacist because this is how it looked like in the 1980s, actually, when I grew up. I grew up in East Berlin, and my father had a pharmacy, so that was quite a typical picture when I was visiting him. They were making some semi-solids, ointments, creams. I was a young child, so I found it quite intriguing. And you can imagine especially how intriguing this was, not only a white cream, but something black. And especially if a child was explained this is a coal tar, then everybody was looking with big eyes. What are you talking about? So for me, this was one of the reasons that I became a pharmacist, and now I work as pharmacist and clinical pharmacologist. So I'm not a clinician, so no clinical questions later, please. However, I think it's also important to have the view of a clinician. So I'd like to quote my colleague and friend Deepak Balak, who said, psoriasis management without topical therapy is like French cuisine without butter. I had to think about it. The reason is I have a French wife. So first I wanted to know what does in the French cuisine butter means. So this morning I took this picture. Our fridge in Leiden. For those of you who are French, I'm German, by the way. We live in the Netherlands, European story. So this is our fridge, and I think I counted almost 2 kilograms of butter in our fridge. Don't worry, we have 3 adolescent children. They eat a lot of butter, so I don't have to eat everything myself. But we will see, Deepak, at the end if I can really agree to that. But for sure, it's extremely important. Here is a very nice overview of all the different treatment modalities. And we can actually, if we only look at the beginning, it all started with topical therapies, very, very old therapies. There we can see the coal tar and also salicylic acid topical. Then in the 1950s, topical steroids were also added to that treatment options. And then later on in the 80s, the topical vitamin Ds. And for sure, they have been very, very successful. Even though I think the last 20 years we have been focused more on monoclonals and really more targeted approaches, but this is very, very important. Today I will try to recap a little bit about the mechanisms for the topicals, but also give a look out on what's on the horizon. First of all, the use and the importance of topicals worldwide, but also in the Netherlands. Let's not forget, even if we work in a third line or in a pharmacist, that 80% of psoriasis patients do have mild disease. So the patients with biologics is actually, in the Netherlands, we can say it's approximately for 10% of the patients reserved. And the rest is really mostly up for the topical treatment. And I think we can say that everybody of them, all the psoriasis patients use now and then a topical treatment. So can be very convenient. I did a quick research on the Dutch registry where you can actually see over the last 5 years how many patients use the different topical treatments. So you see coal tar. I mean, I saw it in the 80s in my father's pharmacy, but it's still 33,000 users or patients in the Netherlands are using it. And of course, vitamin D is more, and especially the topical corticosteroids are many more. That is just an estimate. So all taken all together, it's very, very important. However, there's one big thing about therapy, pharmacotherapy in general. For orals, we know it's about 40 to 50% of treatment adherence. For topicals, it can be even sometimes lower. So if you as a physician would prescribe it to use it daily, then usually the compliance is pretty poor. So I think that's really one big problem and one challenge. This is the pharmacy approach where I'd like to discuss with you the concept of topical delivery, where we really have three main components. So we have an interaction between the patient, the vehicle, and the drug substance or the drug. And in the next 10-15 minutes, I will go through these. Probably the most important one, as I already said, the compliance is a major issue. So you can imagine if you have done an RCT, where the compliance usually, I work in a phase 1 study, there we see compliances between 90 to 100% because we can call the patient, you haven't administered your drug yesterday, what's going on? And then you can increase the compliance. But in real world, the compliance is much, much lower. So I think in general, one of the main quick wins is actually if we can somehow increase patient compliance. And how do we do that? Usually it's very good with a good vehicle. So here's a little bit the basis. You know that if somebody has psoriasis on the scalp, maybe in the old days there weren't any solutions or shampoos available, but nowadays it's quite nice and convenient to prescribe something like a hair shampoo or a solution that is really dedicated to the anatomical area. So that means that you really need to personalize actually also the vehicle and the route of administration to the patient, and that will increase your compliance. What you can also do in those vehicles, make them more appealing. You will see later on there are nowadays some foams in the clinic that we can use, and this of course has a better cosmetical appearance, and again the compliance will increase by that. So this was about the vehicle. Another important thing about this topical drug delivery is actually how do we get through the barrier, and this is a little bit the background and the biology I'll take you through. So we know that the main barrier function is provided by the uppermost layer of the skin, the stratum corneum. And if you remember back from college, probably you've heard about this, and this is not because I'm from East Berlin and you see a wall with brick and mortar, but this is a real concept. So you have the bricks with the corneocyte, and between the corneocyte, the lipid matrix. And actually we know that if you apply something, if you apply a drug, that usually it goes via this lipid matrix into the skin. Those lipids are highly organized from a lamellar and from a lateral point of view. And this is really the main barrier function, main barrier function. So this is what we need to overcome with our drug and our vehicle. How does it look like? How is it actually, what is it composed of? So we know it's the lipids are composed of equimolar ratios of cholesterol, ceramides, and free fatty acids. And the next story about psoriasis will be about ceramides that we have been analyzed very thoroughly in psoriasis studies. Ceramides are actually composed of the fatty acid chain and the sphingosine chain. So these are really composed compounds They vary in their chain length of the carbon chain and also in their saturation. And you can imagine this kind of variability can lead actually to a highly diverse species. So that means that you have approximately 1,000 different ceramide species. So difficult to analyze. Today I will only focus on those 16 here, and they have those abbreviations basically from their chemical structure. Jumping to the functional effects of that, we know already from other diseases that those differences in ceramide subclasses and the differences in ceramide chain and unsaturation can really yield a perturbed barrier, like in atopic dermatitis, for instance. And it's this kind of circle that your ceramide composition leads to the lipid disorganization and in the end to barrier impairments. And jumping into psoriasis now, so this is a study, a small observational study that we did in 26 patients with psoriasis that had a certain target lesion score and also 10 matched healthy volunteers. You see the controls and the non-lesional skin, they have the same transepidermal water loss. So this is a readout measure for the barrier function. And you see also in lesional skin that actually this is really increased. So you have an increased disturbance. So that means that your water evaporates easier, and that also means conversely that your drugs can penetrate easier into that. This is a complex slide, so now we go from function into the ceramide subclasses, and I think I'd like to draw your attention to this. This is actually where you see the most differences. So these are two related lipid classes, the NS and NP. And actually you see really a big difference. You see that the control and the non-lesional is very similar, like the functional effects, but in composition it's very, very different. Actually you can also plot the ratios, so then you also see this difference very big. For the rest, you can also look at the level of unsaturation. So there you also see a much bigger fraction that has this monounsaturation in one of the lipid classes. You can look at the carbon chain length, where you also see that in lesional skin this is reduced. You can also zoom into one specific subclass, the carbon chain length 34, and there you also see this very, very big differences. Of course, you wonder, how does it correlate, this compositional changes, to the functional barrier? There you see really a nice correlation. So if you have this barrier disturbance in the composition, or this compositional changes, they also lead to higher barrier dysfunction. Importantly, that was the baseline. If we now would treat it and normalize it, and we did that with a monoclonal guselkumab anti-IL-23, then you get these kind of plots. These are all ceramide species with a principal component analysis, and then you see on the left-hand side the controls and the non-lesional skin. On the right-hand side in turquoise you see the week 0, and then over time, after 4 weeks of treatment and 16 weeks of treatment, there's a normalization of the composition of the barrier. And of course in transepidermal water loss you see the same. So this is extremely important, this disturbance, because that means that also your delivery will be different. If we now look at the drug, this is also, I think, the fundamentals. What does the delivery depend on? It depends on two things: the physicochemical properties of the drug. So you should have a certain lipophilicity, and this is due to the fact that it needs to go through the lipids. And it also, you can imagine that the bigger the molecule, the more difficult it is to diffuse. And therefore, size and the lipophilicity are extremely important for the delivery. So now we have already covered these three things actually: patient, drug, vehicle. They all are interacting. So I think this is, for me, one of the key background about this. Now moving on already to what's going on at the moment. So we know in topicals it was for some time quiet, but we are very happy that very recently we actually had two different approvals. So far only in the American space, really by the FDA. So we have tapinarof, so that's a real hydrogen receptor agonist that also has been shown to normalize the barrier in the end by decreasing the inflammation. Again, not yet available in Europe. And I think the second thing, not only a new mechanism of action, but for roflumilast, which is a PDE4 inhibitor, they also combined it with a new formulation. So they brought actually a cream and a foam on the market. So this is really a nice innovation. And again, you don't need to focus only on the mechanism of action, but you can also really innovate in the vehicle. Again, not yet available in Europe, but still I think on the lookout. How does it work? So it's an aryl hydrogen agonist, actually, and it's a longer story, but I think in general it's really working anti-inflammatory, and the antioxidant response goes up, and in the end also the skin barrier normalization takes place. Most importantly, for the little child in the East Berlin pharmacy, is that it's actually not so different. It's exactly the same mechanism of action as coal tar. So in that sense, for me, this circle was really round. Other opportunities we have for topicals, so there is quite a lot of different developments. So like I said earlier, on the one hand, you have novel vehicles, so that might be novel lipophilic excipients that can actually be used as penetration enhancer, and then you can use systemically available drugs like cyclosporin A. That is always from a delivery perspective one of the challenges. How do I get systemic cyclosporin onto the skin and into the skin? So that's a possibility. We see one company in the US that works actually with microneedles and tries to have ceramic particles that punch the skin, and then you get siRNA delivery. But of course, it can be also used for other compounds. We already talked about foam formulations. So this is for the patient perspective, extremely important that you have innovation there. Other mechanisms of action of drugs. Yeah, I think you need to agree with me. In the last 20 years, we have seen many new immunologicals, I would call them. And of course, dermatology has really benefited from it. Of course, a monoclonal you cannot easily apply on the skin or won't go over your barrier. But the JAKs, the tyrosine kinase inhibitors, the list is very long, you see. I think it also has been established, but for the IL-17 axis, or an anti-IL-23 or an anti-IL-17A, I know behind curtains that sometimes I hear something about it, so there might be also be in the development. There are other modalities like senolytics, targeting the immunometabolic route, or even the microbiome. So I think the future is quite bright. There is the one big but is the, let's say, the pricing, right? This is, I think, for tapinarof, the problem. It's approved in the or not easily, but in the FDA and not yet here. There is always the big price discussion, and that means it's not easily also pushing through in Europe. Take-home message, yeah, I needed to think about it, or I needed to get back to Deepak. So seeing so much butter in the fridge, so I think I agree with you, Deepak, that really it's we really need topicals as clinicians in the treatment. It's extremely important, and I'm happy to see that there's still innovation ongoing, although there was some period where that was not happening. Last slide. This is just making you aware of the big Dutch flagship program, where we are studying in total 840 patients in the Netherlands at all university medical centers, where we also include, it's towards personalized medicine, but in some of the patient cohorts, we also have topical corticosteroids or topical chlormethane gels. So this is, I think, towards more the mechanistic approach that we also have heard earlier. And I think it's good for you to know that. And of course, I'd like to I'd like to close with thanking my collaborators and also you for your attention.
We have like 2 minutes time, maybe short question. I have one. You showed a restoration of the ceramides when patients were treated with guselkumab.
Yeah.
But could it also be the other way around, that the loss of ceramides is inducing Koepner phenomenon? Was it shown that what we see in the clinic is dry skin is definitely an initiator for psoriasis to occur?
Now, let's say for psoriasis, it's really a secondary phenomenon, right? So I think in psoriasis is really the primary pathophysiology is the dysregulation of the mainly Th17, let's say. And then secondarily, you see the loss of barrier function or perturbation of barrier function. So it's different in atopic dermatitis, where maybe it's more coinciding, and it's not only caused by inflammation, but I think in psoriasis, the barrier dysfunction is mainly caused by the primary inflammatory.
It's interesting to discuss, because what I see in the clinic
and that's just a gut feeling. It's not.
Yeah, it's the dry skin and then the psoriasis in people that are genetically prone to get psoriasis. So it's intriguing, the ceramide story. Thank you. Any other? Yeah, Julien.
Very short remark. I was rather surprised by the consumption of coal tar in your country. We don't use it anymore.
Ask Deepak. This is really for a clinician. This is the official Dutch registry. So this is really what the health insurer had declared. So the number should be correct. So.
Yeah, I also think to add is that typically it's also used sort of in a daycare setting in clinics because coal tar for patients is a crime to use at home. So I think probably it's more in hospital setting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.